Hello and welcome to Deep Dives with New Perspectives. I'm Michael Bartlett with Merrylin LeBlanc. Good morning, Merrylin. How are you today?
Good morning, Michael. It's an interesting solstice morning. We're actually the exact time of the solstice will be sometime this morning. I don't have it right in front of me, but
Already, the sun is already in Capricorn.
the sun is in Capricorn and it's winter. And we started out here in Santa Fe, at least where I live. I know you could live in another part of Santa Fe and have totally different weather. But we started out with overcast and now the sun is shining.
You never know what you're going to
So
get.
I'm going like, oh, thank you, sun, that giving us an indication that the season has changed. And so, yeah.
A little more light coming our way. This is, a day of great ceremonies, and, our ancestors would do a lot of celebrations around here. It's no surprise, that we have Christmas soon hereafter. The Northern Europeans still, do like Santa Lucia, bless, basically saying, the saint of light, so to speak. But, they have a physical embodiment in
The return of light. And, of course, Christianity chose what, 4 or 5 days later to celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ, and often referred to as the light of the world, and basically talking about, consciousness, that light is a metaphor for consciousness. And I'm just wondering, like, what does Saturn, the ruler of Capricorn, have to do with consciousness and light? I mean, it's a planet that's often depicted in darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any views on that, Michael? I could go
Well,
on.
it's one of those things that I find very interesting in that Saturn is that which we have to build on. It takes time, it's like this muscle that we have to work and we have to learn in our lifetime, whatever that kind of agreement is. And I really feel that, for consciousness to have like a place to land, there needs to have been some work done. So that's how I see Saturn's playing it. It's his especially with Capricorn, structuring itself for that higher, when I think of Capricorn as being, the sea goat, the land goat, and then the mountain goat. And to get up to that mountain and be able to gain that perspective takes a little, you don't do that your first day.
Right. So Saturn, its ruler, is somewhat of the platform from which we start. If you think about it in terms, you talk about a sea goat, if you think about it in terms of diving boards in, these Olympic game pools where they have different heights, etc. And we each start on our own level of platform with Saturn. And sometimes that's a level that has an expansive view, a lot of insight. And sometimes it's a lower level. And, we talk about it as the Lord of karma and dharma. And it can speak volumes about our past. And I mean that in the most metaphoric sense, not necessarily our past here on planet Earth. And perhaps if you believe in past lives, it is that. But, things that we have been involved in and done that need more attention, or need, and that attention can be reprimands that need to be righted, or it can be actually you've got the qualifications, you've got the skills to do this, so go to Earth and do it.
And consequences, right? I mean, Saturn is also, the god of consequences. Like, oh, well, it's okay if you don't want to do it now. It just means that, you're going to take care of it later, and it's going to either cost you more in time, energy, effort. There's to me, there's just something about Saturn's like, oh, okay, you don't want to pay attention to it. Okay, well, we'll it's kind of like the bookie, you're like making a bet and you start owing money, and then you don't realize, you're paying an interest rate that you can never get out of.
Right. Well, I was actually thinking of that concept, in Catholicism, they talk about, when you die, your whole life will be revealed before you. And actually, when you read about near-death experiences, some of the people who've written about that subject have brought that up, that one of the experiences of the soul is to review the life. It's sort of like when you're sent out on an assignment, by some big corporation, say, and or a government, agency, like the Secretary of State has to go to India to see what's going on there, comes back and a report is expected, some kind of full disclosure report. And that sort of what, it sounds like we do, and that's related to Saturn when we die, with, yeah, goes through that
I was
sort of.
thinking two things. Like, did you ever see the movie that Albert Brooks did years ago? He stars in it, and it's with Meryl Streep, and Shirley MacLaine even is in it, has a part in it. It's called Defending Your Life.
No, I didn't
Oh,
see
it's hilarious because it's like he gets killed, and and before he knows it, he's in this thing, and it's this interesting view of life. And actually, Saturn plays in a way in this, because what it comes down to is like, how much did you allow fear to operate your life? And so what it was is you had the life review, which was really great. Rip Torn is his attorney, by the way, which is just hilarious in and of itself. And so there are different episodes of his life showing, these things, where, it's like, it shows like there's some fear, and then he has to say, like, was it really fear, or was it just like a different kind of a motivator? Because Saturn's like that, right? Saturn provides you, I think sometimes, and even though I say that Saturn will wait, when it's your time, it's, hello, Chronos, the other name for Saturn, the old name, is, time for your time is due. That's when you're due. It can become due in one moment. And speaking of one moment, we have a very clear example of that. I mean, this Christmas weekend is not an easy Christmas weekend. I mean, we've got a Uranus Saturn square happening on Christmas Eve, and then we've got Venus backing back into reversing, in the retrograde motion onto Pluto. These are going to be some I think there's going to be some hurt feelings and things being said around the holiday table this year.
Definitely a lot of review, and I'm distracted. If you notice, there's light blinking behind me.
Yeah.
The sun moving around the clouds out there. That's not I don't have any lights on in this room, actually.
Okay, I was worried I was starting to have like some kind of an
I
epileptic
think it's a moment
seizure.
of blinking, saying, pay attention here, whoever's watching this, pay attention. This is really important. This is, of course, it's the second holiday season that we are overshadowed by COVID. And I overshadowed.
I'm so glad to know I'm not having a seizure.
Right. Well, and Saturn, I mean, just in terms of that too, Saturn has a lot to do, no matter where it is in one's chart, and no matter where Capricorn is in one's chart, it speaks overall to an element of what you do for a living, what we call career. But it's not strictly, the absolute nature of the career. I mean, it is the nature, but it isn't the absolutely job that we have. But the qualities in the job are reflective of our Saturn and of our Capricorn placement. Case in point, I'll just use myself as an example. I mean,
Yeah.
Saturn in the 8th house. What am I dealing with? I'm dealing with the occult. I'm dealing with psychological issues. And my Capricorn's in the 4th house. I mean, some people think of home and family, but it is actually the source of our souls as well. So there's a kind of a soul issue that comes up there. And I've done this on people's charts that do very different kinds of jobs. And I've seen this repeatedly, that no matter where Saturn is in one's chart, there's a reflection on what we've come here to do that has a lot of influence in whatever we call our job or career. Yeah.
Saturn and
And
Pisces.
yeah, and so there is
Saturn
this
and Pisces.
Saturn and Pisces. So there you go with, well, your
The
whole
ancient
kind of
wisdom teaching.
spiritual perspectives. And it's not just astrology. I mean, you've been pursuing different aspects of spirituality and the mantic arts associated with spirituality for many
whole life.
years. Yeah, yeah. So there is that strong thing. Also, you're reminding me by saying that how Saturn is connected also to the moon's south node in some traditions. And that's an area that in one's chart that one has experienced from various perspectives. It's sort of a comfort level, even though it might not be all about good stuff. We're familiar with it. And yeah, and so if you want to look for issues of things that need to be readdressed, that's another area in a chart. Not only the placement of Capricorn, the placement of Saturn, but also the placement of the south node. They're all indicators. And then of course there are the signs that are involved with those parts of a chart other than Capricorn. You have Saturn and Pisces, you said, right? Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah, and then we have Uranus, the other ruler of Aquarius in the sign of Taurus squaring. So we've got this very, this way in which something, and a third quarter square at that with Saturn in relationship to Uranus. So to me, it's like something to do with our behavior patterns. I mean, like you said, this is our second year of dealing with this sort of experience here. And
yeah, it's sort of a wake up call to a certain kind of consciousness that goes, I can't keep repeating this pattern. And both of these, Saturn and Uranus, being these planets that deal with collective energy, one of the biggest things for me is we can't continue this form of capitalism we have on this planet, not with climate change, not with the inequities that people live on, and not just in this country, but across the world. But we could just stick with this country. The growing differentials. And I've heard people who are on very fixed incomes, like retired people, and fixed incomes where the whatever plans they made don't have huge percentages of investments coming back to them. And the way the economics are going in this country, we're going to see a lot more. I mean, we probably already do. I don't know the statistics on this. A lot more elderly people, retired people out on the streets if we don't do something drastic.
And yet it's also interesting. I was reading a statistic the other day that said basically 70% of the individuals who have left the job market are 55 and above. So it's like, well, that's a significant number of people, and they're leaving. Why are they're leaving the job market not to return to it?
Right. Well, I saw one interview on television of a man in that bracket who had savings of over $100,000, I forget, but he figured that he had enough savings that he could reorganize his life over a period of 3 years. So that's one scenario of people that are leaving. But as one other senior citizen, myself being a senior citizen, indicated that a lot of seniors probably aren't aware of the road we're on and the impact it may have unless things change drastically. Because it's what we're seeing here in Santa Fe. This is holiday season, but in fact, and we weren't really planning on going down this element of it. But I have to say that, with the Uranus, Saturn square, Venus retrograde, that this energy is, yes, enjoy the holidays, folks. But these are things that are going to be on a lot of people's minds. And I know I'm in a a book club right now that's looking at the environment and going along with this book called All We Can Do. And I don't walk away. There's a lot of things that are being done, which actually are wonderful and everything. But in my mind, the biggest things are not yet being done. Like, we should all be driving, and I'm one of them that isn't, because I can't afford to buy a new car or even a used electric car at this point. We should all be driving, if we're driving, electric cars. We shouldn't be driving gasoline guzzling cars. And I mean, in terms of the impact overall on the environment, I mean, part of it is just what we're spewing, the carbon that we're spewing into the climate, and the things that I'm reading that are really wonderful and good are, for the most part, dealing with things like the rising ocean. Well, I'm sorry, you can move away from the ocean. I mean, not that there isn't things to be done in some of those situations where there's densely populated areas close to the ocean. But, you know, in terms of what's going on in the air, we need drastic measures, and these are things that governments should be agreeing on and doing. And
Mandating.
we see very little, a lot of talk, but very little action. And when you dig beneath the surface, the action goes to, and this is a Venus issue, and Venus retrograde in Capricorn might help here, but it's sort of like, don't want to lose my source of income. You know,
Or
follow
my
the money trail.
comforts. Or my comforts, right?
Yes, yes.
That's a
But
Venus.
behind them is money. I mean,
Right.
for some of those people,
Right.
you know, it's some of us get comfort that requires very little as far as money goes.
Exactly. Right.
Comfort to be able to walk in the woods. You know, if I'm
Live
nearby.
simply so that others may simply live.
Very well put. Very well put.
That was like a 70s line, I believe, isn't it? So here we are, almost 50, almost 60 years later.
Well, I mean, there have been people talking about climate change back in those days.
Yeah, exactly. You're right.
This has been a topic for decades.
And rightfully so.
And we're still not doing anywhere near enough, or on a percentage level, anywhere near halfway point, or even maybe quarter point, you know, 25%, whatever.
So when we think of Saturn, Uranus, and square to one another, it's just like, you know, to me, that's like, you know, something that's not, you know, a surprise at the dinner table. It's a shock. And yet that's, you know, those are the two modern and traditional rulers of Aquarius. And so there's this way in which, you know, so how do we take that old form, you know, and ratchet it up in a way that actually works for people and isn't stuck in the past? Right? Because isn't that, you know, that's to me is like one of those, you know, that's the koan of that energy, right? You know, because it's not creating accidents and problems just to be creating accidents and problems. It's like, you know, hey, you know, we're going to upset the ox cart because this ox cart, you know, maybe we shouldn't have the oxen pulling this anymore, you know. Hello, Uranus and Taurus, right? You know, maybe you need to be, like you just said, you know, no more gas cars. I just read one of the government agencies says that within a few years that all new cars have to be getting at least 55 miles to the gallon. Well, that's a good, you know, that's a good option with it, but that isn't, you know, like you said, that's not switching over to the electric. You get so much money in the oil and gas industry. I mean, that, you know,
I know it's just appeasing people, and I mean, appeasing people. I'm sorry, appeasing people with money, with a nice level of income, and you know, as far as that goes, but it's not considering the vast majority of people in the world.
Well, it's funny. I think it's funny that you use the word appeasing, because it's not appeasing. What it is a payback for the contributions and the other things that have been given. I mean, it isn't, they're not just doing it to make these individuals happy. There, there's a quid pro quo sort of situation going on.
Yeah. I was curious, these two planets are on the 12th degree of, well, Uranus and Taurus, the 12th degree of Capricorn for Saturn. And I was curious about the symbols for those degrees. And for Saturn, it's a science lecture on natural wonders. This is about looking at general principles, and basically that's what we're talking.
Climate change, right? Among other things.
And Taurus, where Uranus is a young couple window shopping. We should be checking out different things. What does it make sense to give these bargains to people for gas guzzling cars? Does that make any sense?
And is window shopping meaning like what Musk and Bezos are doing, wanting to check out other planets?
Oh yeah, get to the moon or something. How selfish! I mean, to me, maybe I've kind of glanced. I don't read much of what they've said, and I don't listen to them. But there was something that I did spot, and then I went, okay, where it sounded like they were thinking of other people, but to me, it's a very selfish perspective. And how many people could you take with you to the moon? And
why?
And why exactly? And how much time would that take compared to where we are right now? To me, it's a very self-centered.
Well, the hard part is when you think about,
at some point, if humanity survives on this planet, at some point we are going to be exploring and settling in space, in the solar system somewhere. I imagine maybe on Mars, maybe on the moon, having a transfer station. Or I don't disbelieve that will happen. But to think about outer space as a refuge from the Earth, and letting the Earth isn't really going to die. She may become, for the most part, not pleasantly inhabitable,
right?
Uninhabitable.
Right.
But she's gone through these kinds of extinctions before, and then she rejuvenates. So
she's her own big, huge organism. I mean, we are but parasites upon her body.
Well, it's the human race that's at peril here.
That's. Mm-hmm.
And of course, as many other species which have already become extinct, many of them, not all of them, but many have. So it's that kind of life here on the planet that is perishing. This is interesting. My friend Martin Goldsmith, who sometimes does some Moonwise with me, is talking about animism, which is the belief of life and everything. And I had been thinking, I've had my animistic moments in my life, but mostly with organic matter, like plants and things, and other animal beings. But then I thought, oh yeah, rocks have a consciousness. First of all, I started thinking of precious stones, and crystals, and tourmaline and peridot, different things, and they have energy, and we as humans can program them. And I mean, quartz has been used for computers, and this communication technology, and so there's a consciousness that just it'll probably survive on Earth, but human consciousness as we know it, unless it mysteriously shows up again, which it probably has, I mean, in other forms, But whether or not, I mean, maybe there is a time for that kind of Plutonian death and transformation to go on. I mean, is that an inevitable, and being in these outer planets, I wondered about that. I kind of looked ahead. I thought, oh, and I don't have it written down, that um it's going to be like in 10 and a half years. Yeah, and I think it's the June of 2032, where Uranus and Saturn come together to start a new cycle. And so this last quarter phase will have 10 years of experiences, but that new sort of cycle will be in the sign of Gemini,
Mm.
which is more about communication and
Transportation.
transportation. And you think of technology and how where it's going. um Life as we know it, I mean, maybe humans will start getting brain implants to, the bionic man kind of concept, um in order to survive some of the harshness of the planet. Who knows? um
Your clouds have now started coming over to our area of town.
uh, yeah, there's sort of like a halo behind your head at the moment.
Well, I've got the ring in front of me.
Well, it caught my attention. It's not moving like mine was, but it felt like a spotlight
Is
of.
my nimbus showing again? I'm so sorry.
All right.
Only Aquarians think that way, right? We're always looking for our halo, darn it. Where's our halo? I think that's actually my Sagittarius Aquarius energy. I think the two of them have very much like a, oh, there's a little choir of angels behind us as we're working away.
Oh yeah. Well, and the air signs, there's angelic energy in them. There is.
Yeah, we could really use some right now.
Yeah. Oh, they're around. They're helping, but not necessarily not necessarily on our crazy economic situation.
Well, I mean, it's about
Maybe they are,
frequencies
but I don't
too,
know.
right? And so when people are dealing with survival issues or dealing with interacting with individuals who are harmful to them, being in harmful relationships with others, it's hard to be in a safe enough space sometimes to really understand some of these things. And so, I think a lot about what's going on in these times too, are people really trying to find out, what is true for ourselves? What do we need to do for ourselves in order to take care of ourselves? What is right human relationship? I think of that as, part of the air signs,
Well, in
going.
response to that too, Venus going retrograde in Capricorn for 40 days. It's like the metaphorical 40 days in the desert. It's like retreating to, in an area that doesn't have the distractions that our commercialized lives have. Retreating to figure out, what our true roles are here.
Yeah, because we have to understand that area that Venus is now retrograding over is the same area that Pluto has already dredged. So like that is an empty, open valley for Venus to walk through and hopefully pluck out some gemstones along the way in the deep ravines, finding those little gems. The hard part, I think, is we grow up, when we're young. I don't know, like the difference, I think, in some of the generational stuff right now is, which I think is a Plutonian thing, it has to do with, our views on life. And so, a lot of us who have done a lot of work and see that this is the way that things have to be done come from this work ethic. And then now the younger generations who simply want to be appreciated and honored for who they are. It's a beautiful idea. How do we make that real? How do we give everyone a value? How do we start valuing and blessing everyone in a way and supporting everyone for who they are rather than what they can individually do or not do? Because as we move to this automated way of being,
right. Well, and that
right?
speaks to a different economic system. Totally.
Yep, some would say, some sort of a socialized structure. So, a way of, because as the system becomes more automated and we have more people living who don't need to, that we don't have to have work in these certain areas, what do we do for these individuals?
Well, I've often thought of it as more we're freed up to use our minds, use our consciousness.
Right, but consciousness doesn't, and then maybe that's what this new generation, especially I think the Uranus, Neptune, conjunction generation, like how does one get supported for one's consciousness? That's the $1 million question.
That's where you need a different economic system.
Exactly.
Like, just by way of example, even in this country that I think you brought this up in one of our sessions, the city of Stockton in California was giving everybody like $500, not that they could live long on $500 a month, or I think it was a monthly thing. But the outcomes of that, because people thought they wouldn't be working as hard, they were. And they were more productive. And it wasn't like they went out and, blew that money on some entertainment or something. But it well worked. And we had a candidate in the Democratic Party for presidency in the last election who was talking about a universal $1,000 for everybody. It isn't, and that in this day and age isn't gonna, support somebody solely either. But there's this idea of really kind of equalizing the field on some level so that certain needs can definitely be taken care of. That nobody should be without shelter.
Right.
And I mean, a place they can call, not just any kind of shelter,
Right.
but a place they can call a home.
Right.
Nobody should be without food to sustain them throughout the day. And I'm talking about the ideal 3 meals a day sort of thing.
Right.
Nobody should be without the health care that they need. And nobody should be without the support of educating themselves, whether it's self-education via computers and books, etc., or whether it's in a school.
Right.
These are basic human needs that, some people are calling them basic human rights. And probably that's the best term to use in these days. Instead of thinking of humans as possibly your slaves, your servants, to do, to clean your house, to watch your kids, whatever. No, basic human needs need to be addressed for everybody, regardless of the roles that we play in society. And those are basically roles. I'm not,
And how wonderful to live in a time when we can even have this conversation. That we, when you think back to human history, the idea that individuals could even have those as possibilities, housing, education, food, healthcare. All those things are like, that was so far from the idea of someone living in a fiefdom or a kingdom in which, basically everything like trickled to the top. And we're still running under that old model.
Yeah, but countries in Europe lived under that model and are no longer living under it today. I can remember, and I think that, this was decades ago, I was reading about, retirement in Holland and the Netherlands, and how, you had your housing covered, you had your meals covered. It was sort of like you could continue on and not have to go to a job that you could no longer really manage because of your health, your physical health, or your mental state, or whatever. And of course, all of Europe has universal health care. I mean, as I hear on the news frequently, we're one of the only industrialized nations that doesn't have some kind of socialized medicine.
We need to if America can step away from the for-profit model for education, for healthcare, for these things that are just basically our basic human needs, I think it would just completely transform the landscape.
Yeah, it's a very difficult, people's beliefs and attitudes about things are really hard to change. And I'm thinking about Joe Manchin right now, the
You and me
senator
both.
from West Virginia, who doesn't want to support, President Biden's agenda for helping people, and yet his state, and I've seen it on the news, and I really go kudos to those people who are putting this out there, how the state that he represents has the highest rate of needs for the programs that are being negotiated and proposed.
Yeah, hopefully he can get hopefully another Democrat can run against him.
West Virginia is very Republican, but we'll see. I mean, obviously it's a kind of a strange.
I'd kind of say he's acting as a Republican.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, if it wasn't for the numbers game right now, you'd say, you just pretty much say, Joe, go ahead and switch parties. And I've read things though that there are certain things about certain Republicans that he is not aligned with, not all of them, but a particular individual, and that everybody pretty much who that is. But yeah, in any event, we're in a strange situation.
Yeah, maybe we'll see after, maybe after this weekend with these changes and happening. This is the final Saturn Uranus square, right?
Yes, they will not make another square. They had 3 this year, and this is the last one on Christmas Eve. Yeah.
So look back on those other dates when that was going on and see what was going on in your life, and chances are you might be having some similar themes showing up this weekend.
Well, so yeah, it was over this year too.
Right.
So, go back and just review the whole year in terms of the structures of the year and the surprises that came into the year.
Well, I want to wish everyone out there a happy holidays, whatever religion you are, whatever it is you're doing, wherever you are on the planet. Many blessings to you and your family. May you find peace and joy and ways of finding out what the truth is for yourself in compassionate and loving ways.
Yes, may we all become enlightened.
If you like what we're doing here, please hit like, please hit subscribe, please share with your friends. We enjoy being here. Please leave comments. Gives us good algorithms, they say. Have a wonderful day.
Happy holidays.